Hello guys, in this couple of videos we are just going to see the number of important questions in Java, and which is asked in number of interviews where fresher get stuck and number of people who are experienced also they are stuck. So we are just going to review all those questions, and we are just here the difference in my tutorials on others tutorials is basically that I'm just going to pick the question which is given on the particular websites. We have number of websites we have there, those have number of interview questions, and even I just want you to give me questions which I can describe you. So I'm just going to elaborate that questions into my videos also, so that I'm going to basically do. And I'll just cover a number of questions on that particular topic. So at the first we are just going to start a constructor, which is basically it's one of the basic topic, but yeah, it is one of the important topic also, which can be used in interviews questions. It can be not, it is basically you in usually every interview asks about the constructor and basically rules about the constructor and what constructor is, so people get stuck about telling those answers. So we are going to start all those questions. So I have selected a websites, here I was just looking at internet, so I found one of the websites where I've seen that number of question is being given here. So what about the constructor, what is the purpose of default constructor, what is written, what constructor have a return value, and is constructor is inherited, and can you make constructor final. So we have a number of questions we have right now. So at on going to on all those questions, first of all I'm just going to cover the basics, because going on big things, if you're not clear with number of questions and number of topics, if you're not clear with basics itself, so you're not going to learn all those things. So you should to be known with theoretical knowledge also, as well as practical knowledge also, that will be helpful for you. So here we have a constructor. What is constructor? So I've what the definition, a simple definition I've found, uh, and what I used to say on interviews also, because I'm also looking for an interviews and I also given interviews and working here. So what I say in interviews, that constructor is nothing but same as a method, it is used to invoke the object. This is basically a simple definition you will ever find. So what is constructor? Constructor is nothing but same as a method where it is used to invoke the object. So constructor is nothing but same as method where it is used to invoke the object. So what is constructor? Three things we have. Three technical things we have here: constructor, method, and object. And we are invoking the object. So four things you can say. So I'll just going to elaborate this. So here with an example I'll just tell you. I have a constructor. Just don't think about a default constructor and whatever return had here. I have a constructor here, t, and I have same as a class name. So constructor also have a name with which have a same as a class name. So as I'll just make you see in that NetBeans ID. So I have a class name t here, and I have a main method public static void main string args, and I have created an object. So I've created as t with a reference variable a with have I have a memory allocation with new, and this is an object which we have. I have created that particular class with a name t. So here you can see that I have a class name. I have created an object, but you can see that there is no constructor here. So I'm just going to tell you about the meaning of default constructor. So at a time of class, when there is no constructor, at a time of class when there is no constructor, that constructor is defaultly called by JVM, and that constructor is called as default constructor. Once more, when we have no constructor in a class, once we have no constructor in a class, and during a file loading, and when we run that particular application while creating an object of that particular class, so that a constructor being called defaultly by a JVM, and that constructor is set to be default constructor. Default constructor is called by JVM. So two things we have done. When there is no constructor into our class, you can see I have no constructor into a class here. When there is no constructor into the class, and when we create an object of a class, then a default constructor is being called by the JVM. This is a definition of Default constructor. What is definition of user defined constructor? When a constructor is defined by a user. Here I define a user defined constructor, int a. But before that, I'll have to create a default I'll have to create a default constructor without parameter, you know. That due to that we can create a user defined constructor. Sorry. Right. So this is, so when we created user defined constructor with a parameter, so why we want a user defined constructor? So the question maybe arise at the time of interview, why we need a user defined constructor when we have a default constructor, you know. So there is a default constructor which can contain some default values which can be used in particular class while applying some methods and all those things. So when we have something into our class and we just want to put them a default in local variable, you know, and I just want some next thing also, and where I just want to use something or else in number of constructors, so I need a number of constructor for that. So number of variable for number of constructors, so we need a number of constructor here. So I have created a t with a parameter int a. As far as that, we can create number of constructor with the same name. So what we can say, here we have a t, here we have a name t, and here we have a name t. So third thing we learn, that constructor must have same as a class name. So again we should to go back. So what we have learned, that what is default constructor and what is user defined constructor. That's it. And now what we are going to see, that rules of constructor. You can see here I've written the three rules here. We are just going to look at all those three rules, but there are a number of more rules there which we will see. But these three rules are most of one of the important rules. Constructor name should be as class name. This should be remembered by you, that constructor, whatever the name of a class, that constructor should be same as class name. Constructor does not contain any return type. Why constructor does not contain return type, we will see. But constructor is not a method, that's the reason constructor does not have any return type. Method have return type. Method we create just because, why, that we just want to implement, we just want to do on that method. Method, what is method? Method contains something, so method do something, you know. So that's why that method should have return type. So constructor that doesn't have return type, but yes, it has same as method, but it has return value, it doesn't have return type. Each constructor can be differentiated by their different parameters and passing that object of that parameter. So where we can pass the object of that parameter, we can pass by creating an object. So I have a t here and I just want to pass, I just want to call this constructor. So I'm just giving a reference name b and new here, and you can see here like I'm passing 10. So when I'm passing 10, so at that time this constructor is being called, this and this constructor is being not called. uh, if I'll remove this, no, let it be right now as it is. So this is calling is calling this particular constructor, and this one is calling this one constructor, right? So this is basically a differentiate between the parameters and a user defined constructor and default constructor. I'm just giving an overview of that. A class contains four variables, you know, four or five variables contains. A class contains variables. Second thing, a class contains constructor. A class contains method. A class contains instance variable, and a class contains static block. A class contains, okay, I just misspelled something wrong I said, I think. A class contains five variables, you know. First is variable, second is constructor, third is method, fourth is static block, and fifth is instance block. Yeah, this is right now. So what is class? Class is basically a blueprint where we are just like we just write our logics, you know. And what is constructor? So constructor we have seen here. Constructor is nothing but it is same as method, which is being used to call or invoke our object, right? Constructor is basically of two types: default constructor, user defined constructor. So default constructor, what is default constructor? Default constructor is basically when there is no constructor into the class, and at the time of file loading and while creating an object, JVM creates a default constructor. What is user defined constructor? When we want a number of constructor into our class and user defines that constructor and user write that constructor, user have a right to operate that constructor on their use. So that type of constructor is called user defined constructor. So what is the rules of constructor? Constructor should have a same as a class name. Constructor does not contain any return type. Each constructor can be differentiated by their parameters and passing the values and variables. So this is the basically about the constructor basic points. There are more number of rules there we are going to see, but this is being